The lock was new. That's what I saw first. Industrial steel, gleaming cold in the November rain. Not the old, rust-pitted brass toggle my father had used for 30 years. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stepped out of my old pickup, the mud sucking at my boots. The air smelled of wet earth and diesel. And then I saw it. A heavy plastic "sold" sign staked deep into the sodden grass, the red letters screaming at me through the downpour. My father, Arthur, had poured his entire life into this soil. He'd turned 10 acres of stubborn, unforgiving clay into a legacy. When he died 6 months ago from a sudden, shocking heart attack, he left it to me and to my sister, Claire. Today, that legacy was gone. Sold. Sold by Claire to him. To her fiancé, Julian. I didn't need to see the paperwork to know. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, the same cold feeling I got the first time Julian visited. He's a man he doesn't look at things, he assesses them. I'd watched him stare at my father's vines, not with the respect of a farmer, but with the hungry, calculating gaze of a man sizing up a target. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers numb and wet. She picked up on the third ring. Her voice was breezy, distant, like she was ordering coffee. "Anna? I'm in a meeting. What's up?" My voice was flat, colder than the rain. "You sold it." The line was quiet for a second. "Oh, that. Yes, it's done." "You sold his vineyard, Claire. You sold our home without even calling me." A sigh. The sound of my impatience bothering her. "It was a business decision, Anna. You have to understand. It was hemorrhaging money. Julian said this was the only way to protect our family's assets. He's moving everything into a new tech fund for me." I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. "How much?" "What?" "How much, Claire? What did you sell our father's soul for?" She hesitated. She was annoyed at me. $150,000. It was a very fair price considering the debt. $150,000. For 30 years of work? For 10 acres in this valley? My God, the tractors alone were worth that. The land, the water rights. Even a fool would know the land itself was worth 10 times that. She hadn't just sold it. She'd given it away. "You're a fool, Claire." "I'm not a fool," she snapped, her voice finally rising. "I'm a realist. You're just a botanist playing in the dirt. You don't understand high finance. Julian handled everything. It's done." The line clicked dead. I sat there, the anger and the raw, staggering helplessness choking me. I was standing in the rain, locked out of my own life, staring at that alien lock. And I truly thought, that was the worst betrayal. I was wrong. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I almost declined it, my thumb hovering over the red icon, but some instinct, made me answer.
"Miss Anna?" A deep, gravelly voice. An Italian accent, rich and old as the barrels in our cellar. "My name is Bianchi. I was a friend of your father's." I stopped breathing. I knew the name. Everyone in the valley knew Bianchi, the legendary wine appraiser, my father's mentor, his greatest rival and, in the end, his closest friend. Yes, Mr. Bianchi, I know who you are. I think you should come to my cellar, he said. His voice was grim. Right now. There is a bottle of Arthur's Folly from 1998 waiting for you. Arthur's Folly? The name made no sense. It was a family joke. A failed batch. Bianchi's voice dropped. Your father. He gave it to me 2 months before he passed. He wanted you to have it, and only you. He said it contained his final secret. I hung up. The line went dead, but the rain was deafening. For a full minute, I just sat in my truck, the engine ticking, the wipers scraping a frantic, useless rhythm against the windshield. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from a deep, vibrating rage. $150,000? It wasn't just an insult, it was an erasure. Claire hadn't just sold a property, she had spat on a grave. She had taken 30 years of my father's sweat, his calloused hands, his sleepless nights worrying about frost and drought, and she'd traded it all? For what? A down payment on a high-rise condo? A new wardrobe for Julian? I thought back to the funeral. 6 months ago. Julian. Slick in a black European cut suit that cost more than my truck. His arm wrapped around Claire's waist like she was a prize he'd won. He'd cornered me by the cheap coffee urn. Anna, he said. His voice was smooth, sympathetic purr. Your father was a true artist, a wonderful man, but not a businessman. He'd smiled, a flash of white, perfect teeth. Don't you worry, I'll take care of Claire. I'll make sure her assets are liquid. Liquid. The word felt filthy then, and it felt even filthier now. He'd liquidated our father, drained him dry. I put the truck in gear, the tires spinning in the mud before finding purchase. I didn't look back at the sold sign. I couldn't. The drive to Bianchi's cellar was 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. I passed rows of vines belonging to other families. Their properties tidy, their gates open. The landscape of my entire life. My father had known all these people. He'd competed with them, drunk with them, borrowed equipment from them. And now? I was the daughter who had let it all go for the price of a mid-range sedan. A final secret? My father wasn't a man of secrets. He was a man of soil, of ledgers, of hard work. And Arthur's Folly? It was a legend, but not a good one. It was the one year, 1998, when a freak frost had decimated the entire valley. Everyone else had cut their losses. Not Arthur. He'd harvested the few frozen grapes he could, convinced he could make an ice wine. It had failed, spectacularly. He'd bottled 3 cases and hidden them in shame, or so the story went. Why that wine? Why now? I pulled up to Bianchi's estate. It wasn't a farm. It was a fortress. Stone walls, iron gates, and a cypress-lined driveway that looked like it belonged in Tuscany. Bianchi wasn't just an appraiser. He was the appraiser. The man who could make or break a vintage with a single word. My father respected him, but he also feared him. I parked my muddy truck next to a sleek black Mercedes. I felt small, ridiculous in my wet boots and flannel jacket. But I didn't care. I wasn't here as a guest. I was here as a daughter. I was here for my father's last secret. Mr. Bianchi's cellar was less a room and more a crypt. The air was cold, still, and heavy with the smell of damp earth, old oak, and something else. History. It was silent, a stark contrast to the storm I'd just left. He led me down a narrow stone staircase, his movements precise, his back straight. He was a man in his 70s, dressed in a simple, pressed shirt and dark trousers, but he carried himself with an authority that felt ancient. He stopped in front of a heavy, dark wood door and turned to me. his eyes dark and sharp, assessing me. "Your father," he said, his voice a low rumble. "He was a master, a true vigneron, not like these new people with their chemistry sets and their marketing degrees. He was an artist. He listened to the soil." He paused, looking at a rack of dusty bottles to his left. "He saved my life, 20 years ago. My wife had just passed. I was broken. I was going to sell this place, walk away. He came here, sat with me, right in this room. He didn't say a word. He just opened a bottle of his 85 Cabernet. We drank it. And in that bottle, I tasted his patience, his belief. It reminded me what was worth living for. That's the man he was." My throat tightened. I hadn't come here to cry, but the genuine, gruff respect in Bianchi's voice was more than I could handle. I just nodded, afraid to speak. I told him what Claire had done. I told him the price. $150,000, I said, and the number felt like ash in my mouth. Bianchi didn't move. His face didn't change, but a cold, quiet anger settled in his eyes. He let out a short, sharp breath, a sound of pure disgust. 150,000, he repeated. He shook his head, a slow, deliberate motion. "She is a fool, a child." She said it was a good price, considering the debt, that Julian handled it? I stammered. Bianchi laughed, a dry, humorless sound. A good price? For Arthur's land? He owned his water rights outright. Do you know what that's worth in this valley? His rootstock is pre-phylloxera, his library of vintages. My dear girl, he said, turning to face me fully, his gaze intense. The tractors and the stainless steel tanks are worth more than that. The land alone, just the dirt, is worth $2 million. The entire operation, the business, the brand, the inventory, the rights, your father's legacy is worth $5 million, minimum. And that man, Julian, he knew it. The number hung in the cold air. 5 million. It didn't feel real. It was a number from a different world, the world Julian and Claire wanted to live in. But it confirmed the sick, cold dread I'd felt. This wasn't an opportunistic sale. This was a theft, a calculated, predatory heist. Bianchi saw my shock on my face and nodded grimly. Now you understand. Your father understood. He saw this coming. He turned and walked deeper into the cellar, to a private alcove secured by an iron gate. He produced a key and opened it. He came to me 2 months before he died. He was worried. Worried about Claire. Worried about... Bianchi walked to a small, unassuming rack. On it sat a single, dust-covered bottle. The handwritten label was faded but clear. Arthur's Folly, 1998. He gave me this, Bianchi said, his voice softening. He told me, if Julian takes the vineyard, give this to Anna. Only Anna. I asked him why this wine, this failure. He just smiled. Bianchi carefully lifted the bottle. It is not for drinking, he said. He told me, the value is not in the wine, but in the seal. Look closer. I leaned in. The top was sealed with a thick, dark red wax, and there, pressed deep into the wax, was a small, metallic glint, the unmistakable shape of a small, flat key. Bianchi took a heavy corkscrew from his pocket, but he didn't use the screw. He used the small, flat knife on the side. With the steady hand of a surgeon, he began to carefully chip away at the hard, brittle wax. He didn't speak. The only sound was the click, click, click of the knife against the glass, echoing in the stone room. I held my breath, my hands clenched. The wax fell away in dark red crumbs. After a minute, he used the tip of the knife to pry the small, dark object free. It fell into his palm with a soft tink. It was a key, a small brass key for a safe deposit box. He handed it to me. It was still cold. He said, "If Julian takes the vineyard, give this to Anna. Only Anna. She will know what to do." I stared at the key. My father, the most straightforward, honest man I'd ever known, had been plotting. He had been setting a trap. I drove to the First Valley Bank in a daze. The $5 million figure kept flashing in my mind over and over, searing itself behind my eyes. The rain had stopped, but the world felt gray and washed out, like a photograph left too long in the sun. I felt disconnected, like I was watching someone else walk into the bank, my boots squeaking on the polished marble floor. The bank manager, a woman I'd known since high school, gave me a sympathetic look. "Anna, I was so sorry to hear about your father, and now the vineyard, it's the end of an era." I just nodded, unable to form words. "I need to access a safe deposit box," I said, my voice sounding thin. She led me back to the vault, a massive, circular steel door that looked like something from a submarine. The vault was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of paper and metal. She checked a signature card, then left me alone in the small, private viewing room. She returned with a long metal box. Box 447. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the lock. It clicked. I lifted the heavy lid. It wasn't what I expected. There was no cash, no jewelry, no gold coins. There was only one thing: a thick, leather-bound ledger, the exact kind my father used to log his harvests. On top of it was a single, thick envelope. My name, Anna, was written on the front in his familiar, strong, precise handwriting. I sat down heavily on the small stool. My heart was a cold drum against my ribs. I picked up the letter. The paper was thick, creamy. I broke the seal. "Anna, my girl, if you are reading this, I am gone, and Julian has made his move." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I am so sorry I had to leave you with this, but I had to protect you, and I had to protect Claire, even from herself. Do not trust Julian. That is not his real name. His name is Jason Vance." I read the words again. Jason Vance. He is a predator, Anna. He's done this before. I've been investigating him for the last 8 months. He targets family businesses, farms, wineries, ranches. He finds an heir he can charm, someone who feels trapped or undervalues what they have. He isolates them, convinces them to sell cheap to one of his shell companies, and then he carves up the assets and sells them for their true, massive value. My blood ran cold. I tried to warn Claire. She wouldn't listen. She said I was controlling, that I was jealous of her happiness. It broke my heart, Anna, but I knew he would move fast after I was gone. I dropped the letter and fumbled for the ledger. I opened it. It was my father's investigation. It was meticulous, horrifying. Page after page of printouts, photographs, handwritten notes. There were photos of Julian, Jason Vance, at another vineyard, his arm around an older, different woman. There were newspaper clippings from Oregon. Oregon family loses Century Farm in investment fraud. Another from France. His notes were chilling. He traced Julian's shell companies to the Cayman Islands. He'd found a pattern. He's not just after the land, my father wrote. He's after the water rights. That's the real prize. He thinks he's buying a dying business. He thinks he's stolen our legacy for pennies on the dollar. I turned to the last page, a final note, his handwriting a little shaky. I set a trap, Anna, in the cellar.
A trap only you and Bianchi would understand. He thinks he bought a dying vineyard. He doesn't know about the royal collection. Find Peter. He's a private investigator. He's expecting your call. He'll know what to do. Below it was a phone number. I left the bank and drove straight back to Bianchi's cellar. The little brass key felt heavy in my pocket, like a stone. I didn't go back to the vineyard. It wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene. I showed Bianchi the ledger and the letter. He read them in silence, his face carved from stone. He didn't look surprised. He just looked angry. Peter, he said, pointing to the name on the last page. Peter Coleman, a good man. Used to be a detective. Now he finds stolen art, stolen wine. He finds men like Julian. Bianchi motioned to the old rotary phone on his desk. Call him. Use this. It's secure. I dialed the number. My fingers felt thick and clumsy on the old phone. He answered on the first ring, his voice all business. Coleman. Mr. Coleman? My name is Anna. My father, Arthur, he left your number. I found the ledger. The line was quiet. I heard him take a slow breath. Anna, I've been waiting for this call. I am so sorry about your father. He was a great man, and he was a damn good investigator. You knew? I whispered. You knew all of this? We built the file together, Peter said. Arthur hired me 6 months ago. He had a gut feeling about Julian, and his gut was right. This man, Jason Vance, he's a ghost, but a predictable one. He's been doing this for a decade. He has a type. Family-run, asset-rich, cash-poor businesses. Preferably with an heir who feels unappreciated. He charms them, isolates them, and then strikes. My mind flashed to Claire, always complaining that Dad respected my work in the dirt more than her high finance job in the city. Julian had seen that wound and poured salt in it. He's in a hurry now. He thinks he's clear. He thinks your father died, the old man is out of the way, and the emotional daughter just signed over the prize. He's already moving. He's listed the water rights on a private exchange. He's planning to strip the assets and dissolve the shell company in 30 days. So what do we do? I asked, my voice shaking. We spring the trap your father said. He told me about it. The royal collection. Is it real? I don't know, I said. My father's private cellar, I never saw. Oh, it's real, Bianchi's voice rumbled from beside me. I realized he'd been listening. Arthur's grandfather brought the rootstock over from a pre-war French estate. He kept a private stock, 500 bottles, priceless. Good, Peter said, because Julian is about to discover it. Your father left a clue, a fake map hidden in his desk. He knew Julian would search the office. Julian will find the map, find the cellar, and think he's won a second lottery. And his greed will make him stupid. He won't report this to Claire. He'll try to sell it off market fast for cash. But who would buy it? A friend of mine, Peter said, a cold smile in his voice. An FBI agent in the Art and Antiquities Fraud Division. We've been looking for a way to nail Vance for years. This is it. We'll catch him selling assets he doesn't legally own, assets he's actively concealing from his business partner, your sister. A cold pit opened in my stomach. But what about Claire? She sold it to him. She sold the vineyard as listed. She has no idea about this hidden multi-million-dollar collection. By finding it and selling it in secret, Julian is committing wire fraud, conspiracy, and theft. But to make it stick, to prove he knew he was defrauding her, we need her. She has to be the one to file the complaint. She has to be the victim. My heart sank. She won't. She's in love with him. She'll tell him. She'll warn him. Then you have to convince her, Peter said, his voice hard. Before you do, I want you to do one more thing. Call the number in that ledger, the one for Oregon. Talk to Stanley Wright. Then call your sister. After I hung up, my hand was trembling. Bianchi poured me a small glass of water. His hand was steady. "Drink," he said. "The next call will be harder." I dialed the Oregon number. A man answered, his voice sounding tired, worn thin. "Wright? Mr. Wright? My name is Anna Bennett. I'm calling because I think my family is a victim of Jason Vance. My father's name was Arthur." There was a long, heavy silence on the line, filled with a static of shared grief. "Oh, God, he got another one. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He told me his story. It was ours, reflected in a dark, warped mirror. His family had a pear orchard. His brother, eager to modernize, had met Jason. Jason had promised new tech, new distribution. He had set brother against brother, convincing one that the other was holding him back. "He made my brother see me as the enemy," Stanley said, his voice cracking. "By the time we realized what he'd done, he'd mortgaged the land, sold our water rights to a shell corporation, and vanished. We lost everything. The farm my grandfather built, gone. It destroyed my brother. He never recovered. I'm so sorry." "Listen to me," Stanley said, his voice suddenly fierce. "This man, he's a snake. He'll find every crack in your family and rip it wide open. Don't let him. Don't let him do to you what he did to us. You stop him. You hear me? You stop him." I hung up the phone. Stanley's words echoed in the stone cellar. "You stop him." I felt cold, but it was a new kind of cold. It was the cold of pure, distilled certainty. The anger was still there, but the helpless, hot rage was gone. In its place was something hard, something focused. I had to face Claire. I couldn't do it at the Vineyard. I couldn't do it at our house. I drove to the city, to the sterile glass and steel high-rise where she lived with him. I called her from the lobby. "Claire, I'm downstairs. You need to come down. Now." She was annoyed. "Anna, I'm busy. Julian and I are—" "Just you, Claire. Alone. 5 minutes, or I'm coming up." 30 seconds later, the elevator doors opened. She walked out, looking every bit the part of the high-finance girlfriend. A silk blouse, pencil skirt, hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She looked like a stranger. She tapped her foot, impatient. "What, Anna? This is really not a good time. We're celebrating." "Celebrating?" I asked, my voice quiet. "Celebrating what? The theft of our family? Oh my God!" She rolled her eyes. "Are you still on that? I told you it was a business decision. You have to let it go. You're just jealous that I'm finally making smart moves, that I have someone in my life who isn't obsessed with dirt and grapes." The casual cruelty of it almost took my breath away. But I thought of Stanley. I thought of my father. I held my ground.
"He's not making smart moves, Claire. He's a con man." "Excuse me?" "His name isn't Julian," I said, my voice low and clear. The lobby was empty, our voices echoing slightly on the marble. "His name is Jason Vance." Her face froze. For 1/2 second, I saw not anger. I saw fear, a flicker of pure animal terror, and in that second I knew. I knew deep down she'd had a sliver of doubt all along. She'd just buried it. "What did you say?" "His name is Jason Vance," I repeated, louder. I pulled the ledger from my bag, the heavy leather-bound book. I slapped it down on the concierge's empty desk. "And this is his playbook." She stared at it. "What is that?" "This is what Dad was doing for the last 8 months of his life, Claire. Instead of tending his vines, instead of sleeping, he was investigating your fiancé. He was trying to protect you." I opened the ledger. I didn't need to pick a page. I just opened it. "This is Stanley Wright. He had a pear orchard in Oregon.
Jason Vance convinced his brother to sell it for pennies on the dollar. Sound familiar? This is the LaRoche family, a vineyard in France. Jason Vance married their daughter, sold their stock, and left her with $500,000 in debt. "Stop it," she whispered. Her face was pale. "Stop it. These are lies. You're making this up." "Am I?" I turned the page to a photo. Julian, Jason, with his arm around another woman, smiling on the steps of a different farmhouse. "Who is that, Claire? His sister? An old friend?" She flinched, a sharp, violent recoil as if I'd struck her. "This is insane. You're trying to ruin me. You were always jealous of me, ever since Dad—" "Don't," I cut her off, my voice like steel. "Don't you dare bring him into this. He died, Claire. He died trying to stop this. He died of a heart attack, alone in his office, probably staring at this very ledger. He died because you brought this monster into our home." The words hung in the air. The truth, hard and ugly. She fell back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. She wasn't the high finance shark anymore. She was just my little sister, and she was terrified. No, he wouldn't. He loves me." "He doesn't love you," I said, my voice breaking, the cold certainty finally cracking. "He's using you. He needed an heir, and you were perfect. You were so desperate to prove you were smarter than just a farmer that you'd believe anything. He told you exactly what you wanted to hear, and you handed him our father's life's work for $150,000. She was sobbing now, deep, gulping sobs right there in the empty lobby. "What did I do? Oh, God, Anna, what did I do?" I wanted to shake her. I wanted to scream at her. But I looked at her, crumpled and broken, and all I saw was the victim Stanley had described, the person left behind to clean up the wreckage. I grabbed her arm. "It's not done yet," I said. "Dad left a trap, but it only works if you help me, right now. You have to make a choice, Claire. Are you going to be his victim, or are you going to be Dad's daughter?" She looked up at me, her face a mess of tears and mascara. What do I have to do?" The next morning was cold and gray. Peter had set up a surveillance van on a ridge overlooking the vineyard. It felt wrong, watching our home like it was an enemy compound. Bianchi was with us, and Claire. She sat in the back, pale and silent, a small microphone taped under her collar. She hadn't slept. She just stared at the house where we grew up. Julian was inside, along with two men Peter had identified as associates from a shell corporation, his appraisal team.
"He's in the office," Peter said, watching a small monitor. We had audio. We heard Julian laughing, telling his men to check the main cellar, inventory the equipment. He sounded relaxed, happy. Then we heard him tell them to take a break. The audio feed changed. We heard him walking into Dad's office, the sound of drawers opening. "He's looking for it," I whispered. "Dad planted a fake map," I explained to Claire, "behind a loose panel in the desk. He knew Julian's greed." We heard a creak of wood, a rustle of paper. Well, Julian's voice purred over the speaker. "What do we have here? Looks like the old man had a few secrets." Claire closed her eyes, a single tear rolling down her cheek. We listened as he followed the map, his footsteps echoing. We heard a heavy scraping sound, the false wall at the back of the main cellar. Then, silence. Just dead air for almost a minute. "What's he doing?" Claire whispered. "He's looking," Bianchi said, his eyes closed. "He's seeing the royal collection." When Julian's voice came back on, it was different. It wasn't relaxed. It was tight, breathless, vibrating with a manic energy. "My God," he whispered to himself, "it's real." We heard him walk back to the office, the heavy sound of the cellar door closing. Then we heard him dial a number. He wasn't calling his associates. He wasn't calling Claire. "It's me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Forget the main stock. Forget the land. I found the real prize, hidden. 500 bottles, pre-war. No, I'm not kidding." He was calling the buyer.
He was calling the FBI. It's got to be quiet, Julian insisted. Cash, $3 million, off the books. My partner? She doesn't need to know a thing. It's a private discovery. Peter looked at Claire. That's it. That's the conspiracy. He's defrauding you. Claire just nodded, her face ashen. She had her proof. They agreed to meet. A private warehouse, downtown, that night. He's moving fast, Peter said, shutting off the monitor. Let's go. The warehouse was vast, cold, and smelled of dust and old tires. We were hidden on a metal catwalk above the main floor, along with Peter and 2 uniformed officers. Below, the FBI agent, posing as the buyer, waited by 2 large briefcases. We watched as Julian's truck backed into the loading bay. He was alone. He loaded the wine himself. He was arrogant, walking with a confident swagger. "You bring the money?" Julian called out, his voice echoing. "Show me the wine," the agent replied. Julian scoffed, but opened the back of the truck. He pulled out a single, ancient-looking bottle. "This," he said, holding it up like a trophy, "is just one of 500. This alone is worth 50 grand. Now the cash." The agent nodded, opening one briefcase. It was filled with stacks of money. As Julian's eyes locked onto the cash, as his hand reached out to touch the first stack, the world exploded. Red and blue lights flashed, flooding the dark warehouse. "FBI! Don't move! Hands in the air!" Julian froze, his hand hovering over the money. He looked confused, and then he ran. He didn't get 5 feet. 2 agents tackled him, slamming him hard onto the concrete floor. "Get off me!" he screamed, his voice no longer smooth or charming. It was a raw animal snarl. "You have no idea who I am. I have lawyers!" And then from the catwalk, Claire and I stepped into the light. Peter was behind us. Julian stopped thrashing. He was on his knees, his hands cuffed behind his back, his expensive suit covered in dust. He looked up, and he saw us. "Julian," Claire said, her voice shaking but clear. "Or is it Jason?" His face changed. It was the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. The charm, the sophistication, the love. It didn't just fade, it vanished like a mask being ripped off. All that was left was a void of cold, reptilian rage. He stared at Claire. "You," he spat, "you idiot, you stupid, gullible. I had it. It was mine. I spent 3 years on this backwater family, 3 years coddling your alcoholic father and listening to your pathetic, childish dreams. It was $3 million. He thrashed against the officers holding him. Then his eyes found me. "And you," he snarled, his face twisting, "the little gray mouse, the mousy one, digging in the dirt. I knew I should have dealt with you first. I should have cut you out completely." I looked down at this screaming, broken man, and I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, just a deep, cold pity. "You didn't have to," I said, my voice echoing in the sudden silence. "My father already dealt with you." The officers hauled him to his feet. He was still screaming, threatening us, threatening Claire, his voice echoing as they dragged him out into the night. Then he was gone, and we were left standing in the silence, surrounded by my father's stolen legacy. The arrest of Jason Vance, Julian as we knew him, unraveled a web of deceit that stretched across 5 states and 2 continents. His entire tech fund was a Ponzi scheme. The press had a field day. Vineyard villain nabbed by dead man's trap. It turned out my father's meticulous ledger was the final piece the FBI needed to connect him to 6 other cases. With Claire's testimony and the evidence from Stanley Wright and the others,
Jason Vance was facing a very, very long time in a federal prison. Our sale, Claire's sale, was voided. Fraud, pure and simple. The $150,000 was returned from an escrow account. The new lock was cut from our gate. The sold sign was torn down and burned. The vineyard was ours again, but it was broken. It felt haunted, not by my father's ghost, but by the raw, ugly scar of what had happened. For a long time, I just worked. From sunrise to sunset, I was in the dirt, pruning back the deadwood, trying to feel my father's presence, trying to scrub away the memory of Julian's greedy hands touching our legacy. 6 months passed. The cold, wet winter gave way to a fragile spring. I was out on the south slope checking the new buds on the vines when I heard a car. It was Claire's, not the sleek city convertible, but a modest used sedan. She got out. She looked different, smaller. Her hair was in a simple ponytail and she was wearing jeans and work boots. She wasn't wearing the expensive jewelry Julian had bought her. She just stood by the car, watching me, as if she was afraid to step onto the soil.
"I dream about it," she whispered, not looking at me. "That last fight with Dad, I called him jealous. I told him he was an old man who didn't understand the world." She was crying, silent tears just rolling down her face. How do you even live with that, Anna? How do you fix it?" I looked at her, my sister. The anger I'd held on to for 6 months, that cold, hard stone in my chest, it just softened. She wasn't my rival. She wasn't a fool. She was just my father's other grieving daughter. "You can't fix it," I said, my voice rough. "You just carry it. You honor it. Dad didn't blame you, Claire. He knew you were a victim too. He didn't trust your judgment, but he never stopped loving you." I held out my pruning shears. "But you can start here. This row needs to be tied. We have a lot of work to do." She looked at the shears, then at me, and finally, she took them. A month later, we stood in the hidden cellar with Mr. Bianchi, the royal collection. 500 bottles, covered in the dust of history, sitting in the silent dark. "With Julie and Don," Bianchi said, "this collection, it will save the vineyard. You can buy new equipment, hire a full staff. Your father secured your future." Claire looked at the bottles, her eyes wide. "He really did think of everything." "Yes, he did," I said. I walked to the back of the small room, where an old wooden box sat on a shelf. He left one last note, tucked inside his original harvest ledger. I opened the box and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was his handwriting, from the very end. His hand was shaky, but his words were firm. I read it aloud. "Anna and Claire, if you are reading this, the trap worked. The vineyard is safe. But the royal collection is not for us. It is blood money, collected by my grandfather from people who lost everything. Its story is one of arrogance. Let its final chapter be one of redemption." Claire looked confused. What does he mean?" I continued reading. "Sell the collection, all of it, and give the money, every penny, to Stanley Wright, to the LaRoche family in France, and to any other victims of Jason Vance that you can find. Our legacy is in the soil, not in these bottles. Let them go. Pay the debt. Start clean." We were all silent. Bianchi finally broke the silence, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face. "That," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "is the Arthur I knew." Claire looked at me, her eyes clear for the first time in years. He was right. He was always right.
Let's make the calls. We're still working. The Vineyard isn't what it was. Not yet. It's hard. Some days I look across the rows and I see my sister, and it's just Claire. Other days, I still see the shadow of the woman who was willing to sell our father's soul for a lie. We caught the predator, but the hard truth is, the monster only got in because my sister held the door open for him. It's made me wonder, who was the real villain in this story? Was it the snake who told the lies? Or was it the family member who was so desperate to believe them? I'd really like to know what you think. Let me know in the comments.